Welcome again to State and Local, and it's eminently local today, but local government. I'm going to be interviewing all of the candidates at the for the May 13th election. I just wanted to say that today my guest is the Incumbent Library Trustee. We're going to talk to him in just a second, but I do want to say I called everybody. Whoever comes in will be on the show, and the interviews will be running from the second week in April right straight through approximately every other day. So I did want to mention that if you're watching and you don't remember that I called you, please get in touch if you would like to be part of this. And so my guest is Glenn Hill, who is currently a library trustee, and he started there in May, and he's going to be on the ballot on May 13th. Oh, thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you, Emery.
Thank you
for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to have a dialogue with you today.
Oh, good,
and
good.
with the voters.
And that's such a lovely name. It's such a mellifluous sort of.
Thank you.
Now, I don't know what a library trustee does. So could you tell us that first?
I'd be glad to. And just one note before that, the election is May 6th, just so
Oh,
that
my
everybody
Lord.
knows. May 6th.
Oh, goodness. Oh, yes. May 6th.
So that everyone knows.
Oh, what's going on? Oh, the 13th is town meeting.
It's town meeting.
Oh,
yes.
that's okay, thank goodness. All right.
Now that we have that out of the way, we could go back to what it is, what a library trustee does. Library trustees are chartered in the state of Massachusetts by the Board of Library Commissioners that is responsible for the overarching administration of public libraries in the state. And the state law mandates that each public library have a board of trustees. And the primary purpose of the board is to lend governance to the library. And when I say governance, I mean guidance and assistance with the library director and the friends of the library over topics of budget, finance, process, policy, and procedure to help make sure that the public is best being served by the library.
Now, can you tell us something about yourself and how you happen to want to become a library, but first about yourself, and then how you came to want to be on the Board of Trustees of the library?
Sure, Anne-Marie. I come from, after having left school in 1975, I've spent most of my career in information processing and information processing systems. Most recently, I was 10 years at Northeastern University as their Director of Information Security and Identity Services, where I was responsible for securing all the electronic and written assets of the institution. I also board certified in protection of persons and property.
What does that mean?
That means protecting institutions, buildings, assets, people, file cabinets, data, things that are of value to institutions.
Now, is there a test for that?
There is. There are industry standards for that.
Oh, my goodness. But now you studied photography in undergraduate school.
Yes, photographic science was my first foray.
So now, can you tell us something about where did you go, and what were you doing there, and where did that sort of lead you originally?
Well, I went to school at RIT in Rochester, New York, and my program was photographic science. And once upon a time, I thought that would lead me to a bunch of time behind the camera with taking pictures of people and buildings, but that quickly morphed into forensic photography, the recreation of images that were sought to be destroyed or images that were in poor quality, so that they could be recovered for use by law enforcement agencies. Now,
that program at Rochester Institute of Technology, is there either an artistic degree, or is there a technical? Because it sounds like what you did was very technical, but could you go either in the direction of fine arts or the technology, or was it all one program?
No, you got it correct. There were two actual separate tracks. One was fine arts, and then the other was technical.
Oh, all right. And so, do you work with police departments, and do you use resources at some of the universities, or what exactly was the scope of what you were doing when you were doing forensic?
Well, before I retired at Northeastern, I did a lot of work with the Boston Police Department and the Northeastern Police Department in the recreation of electronic trails that were involved in cases of electronic wrongdoing.
Now, did you also study computers extensively to be able to do that?
I did.
On your own?
I did that actually, was all self-taught, and at one point I was working in defense installations in Massachusetts repairing electronic data processing systems.
Oh my goodness. And then did you have any occasion to work with any of the universities? And I know you taught at Northeastern. And what did you teach at Northeastern?
I taught two programs at Northeastern. One was information security, and the other was risk management.
So do they offer that certificate at Northeastern? Were you training people for that?
They do. yes.
And now, but you would think you mentioned you had worked at some of the other universities with their technology in this work that you did that was forensic.
We would often work in the recreation of forensic images. We would also work with institutions such as Harvard in the recreation of pieces of artwork that they would have that would need digital restoration. This was before the age of digital restoration, when everything was done in the analog fashion, if you will, or what I call the old-fashioned way, with film and paper and chemicals.
Now, how could you just kind of, it's a big job, I imagine, it's complicated, but can you explain sort of how that's done?
Sure. A very simple example might be you might have an old faded picture of your grandmother where you can barely make out the image, but through the use of selection of the proper film and the proper developing processes, you can create an image that can actually retrieve levels of detail from the photograph that we can't see with the human eye.
And you're working in one of those trays, the old-fashioned trays with the chemicals? Is that how that's done? With
the way we used to do
brushes, or how do you bring? I mean, what's the actual physical thing that you do?
Well, the physical process involves, if you might have a piece of evidence in front of you, an old faded or damaged or altered photograph, by selection of the proper film with which to make an image of that, and the proper developing techniques by means of processing in various chemicals, you can actually recreate images that the human eye can't see and pick up levels of detail that are invisible.
So it's about the chemicals and not so much any kind of handwork.
No, there would be no handwork involved because that would actually create an alteration of an image, which of course would be something we would not do.
Now, what's going on, right? Has anything ongoing at the, among the library trustees? What are they working on now? Are there what are the projects that you've been involved in yourself that you can tell us about?
Great question, Anne-Marie. We have two big projects we're working on right now with a third one off to the side. And the first is we're preparing the budget to go to town meeting. As you know, we'll go to town meeting in May, right after the election.
The 13th.
The election on the 6th and town meeting on the 13th, very good, where the trustees are involved in helping the library director prepare two budgets for submission. One is a level funded budget and the other is an expansion budget. So we actually have to produce two. And then the other item that we've been working on most recently is to review and revise policies of the library, policies around safety and security, policies around borrowing, policies around governance, meeting room use, and electronic services. And as you know, as technology marches forward, you have to continually modify and keep your policies up to date. So we've been doing a lot of policy work together on the board, which is, as you know, a cooperative membership of 3 board members, and we work together with the director of the library on all of our efforts.
And that's Robin Glaser.
That's Robin Glaser.
Glaser, right?
Yes.
Now, as far as the you mentioned expanded budget, will that have to be voted on?
Oh yes. In other words, as you know, all money that would be spent in town, those expenditures are approved at town meeting. So the town meeting will decide what money is spent for the library. And the town meeting obviously has the opportunity to vote up or vote down the expenditure of funds.
But those will come up separately, the level funding and the expansion.
Right.
Expanded funding.
Those are two what I would call side-by-side efforts.
Now, will they say what the expanded budget covers? I assume it's beyond the level funding.
That would be a different budget, yes.
Are they going to give us details about what they're buying, or?
Right now, I don't have the detail about that because it's still in development.
Oh, all right, okay. So, but they'll be ready by town meeting.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me, is it books or is it decor at the library, or is it more salaries, or what? Do you have any idea can you tell us at all about that?
Oh, sure. You know, various items of the library budget are not unlike a budget we would have for our household, where there's a budget for fuel, there's a budget for water, there's a budget for sewerage, there's salary line items, there are supplies line items, there are line items to acquire new materials, and very importantly, line items for technology replacement. As you know, technology is evolving so quickly these days, it seems like if we don't keep up with it, it runs us by. So there are line item budgets for various different types of expenses that are necessary in connection with operating the library.
You know, you just started in May, so you probably wouldn't be able to really comment on this, but I always thought it was much more lavish of a library than was necessary. From the chairs to that little room, that little reproduction of a classroom. Is that what that is back there?
That's actually, I think, Anne-Marie, you're referring to the schoolhouse room.
Yes.
The schoolhouse room is actually the historical site of the one-room schoolhouse that was once on Town Hill. And when the new library was built, there were individuals who were interested in demolishing the schoolhouse so that the library could be built. However,
The original library.
The original library, and the Historical Commission mandated that that building could not be demolished. So to this day,
Oh, is that it?
yes, to this day you can still see a piece of the concrete foundation of the stone foundation, rather,
Yes.
of the original schoolhouse room is still visible in the library.
Is that the original? That's the original? I thought that was all sort of mocked up.
Well, I would call it kind of a modern version of a very old model. And the schoolhouse room, as some people may not know, is the historical archive for the town. In other words, the town's history is stored in the schoolhouse room, and it's a collection that is available for review by anyone that would like to do research.
Now, can anyone go in there and sit and read
Sure.
when they want? Or
Sure.
do they have to let people know?
Well, they would need it. That room is typically secured because of the value of the collection that's in there, but all types of people use it. Groups meet in there. The Friends of the Library meets in there, and the Board of Trustees meets in there. So that room is
Well, that's good to know.
not unlike any other room in the library, which is open to all.
You know, my very first show that I did, which was actually a year ago, with Jeff Palumbo, we went in there, and he was so kind to me. I mean, I was so nervous. He spent so much time with me. And one of the times that for some reason, we went in there, and we were trying to, plan the show and what would be said and this and that and so forth. And we were in there. So I have been in there. And so now, was there a matching of funds when that new library was built? There was something about state money with that. Do you recall that, or do you not?
I was not involved with the library
Right,
at that
right.
particular time. My involvement didn't come on until just after they had built the new library, when it was time to develop a strategic plan. So I would not be able to comment on that. But I can say that the library receives state funds as part of what's called the Equalization Grant, which is an annual grant of funds that public libraries receive, contingent upon those libraries remaining what we call certified. And one of the things that has to be done in order for a library to remain certified is it has to produce an updated strategic plan periodically, which is one of the side things we're working on right now.
Now, can you tell us something about yourself, about how long you've lived in Norfolk, and maybe something about your family? Or
Oh, sure. I've lived in Norfolk since 1995. I moved from Dorchester,
that's when I moved
Massachusetts.
here.
Great minds think alike. Moved here in 1995 from Dorchester. Dorchester had become a little too busy for me.
Whereabouts in Dorchester?
I
Because I
lived-
taught in the Boston schools.
Oh,
And when I taught in Dorchester, I was at, oh my goodness, it had an annex up behind it. I don't know why, I guess I'm drawing a blank. It was over not far from Geneva Road and the Fields Corner. But I can't remember the name of the school. I'm sure I blocked that out along with all the other bad memories.
Well, I wish I could remember for you, but I lived near the old Kearny Hospital in Dorchester.
Oh, okay. I don't know that area. Okay.
And in those days, I was working at the Bank of Boston in information systems.
Oh my God! Well, what a change for you to come from there to here. I mean, you really must have wanted to get away.
I did. I found that my work was so busy that I needed a quiet space at night, a quiet place, a place where I could grow, a place that would offer opportunities. Small towns, I've always lived in small towns, never in big cities. So Norfolk was kind of the right place for me at the time. And it was a very welcoming town, a town that retains many of the characteristics of a small New England town, which is exactly what I needed in my work. I needed a respite at night.
Now,
So I
which
came to
neighborhood do you
Norfolk.
live in?
I live on Tucker Road,
Oh, okay.
which is not far from the center of town.
Right, those are old houses over there.
Some of them
they?
are,
Yeah.
yes, and there's been some new development too.
And that's funny because we were talking before the interview. Glenn is originally from Silver Spring, Maryland, which is very close to where I was. I was born in Washington, D.C. in Northwest Washington, and you were graduated from RIT the year that my niece left RIT, and my niece and he are the same ages, so it's the same age, so it's kind of a funny thing when you mention 95. Yeah, it's been 18 years. It seems like it seems like it's gone really quickly.
It has gone really quickly, and I thank you for the lead-in. One of the first things I did once I arrived in town was to seek an opportunity to give back to the town of some of my skills and services, and I had the extreme privilege in 2004 of working with the Norfolk Public Schools on their Safety and Security Committee, which was enormously satisfying for me. A couple of things that were implemented as a result of the committee's work were video surveillance to help protect the staff and the students in the school, and badging, the wearing of photographic identification badges so that both students and staff in the schools would be able to tell who and who did not belong in the school.
Now, do they wear those to this day?
They do to this day.
Because, you know, the last place that I worked at teaching was West Roxbury High School, and just to be very quick, Harvard School of Ed decided that if there were small schools in these urban settings, by that they meant like multiple schools within a building where there were no more than 400 students, that this would solve all the problems. And they were supposed to have these lanyards, and the lanyards and the pictures were made, and the whole thing was done, and the kids refused to wear them, and nothing was done about it. It was another huge waste of money. So you could be walking around the building and see somebody you didn't know at all, didn't know whether they belonged there, what school they were in or anything, and it was just insane. It was not good. Let me ask you something about, you had mentioned some of the policies might be changing. What would change about the borrowing?
Well, the only thing that would change about the borrowing policy would be that if periods were to be enhanced or extended for people for certain classes of material, and to bring equity across the various fines that might apply for late materials, and to make sure that the policy that allows people to borrow kind of meets the need that's out there. So borrowing is a pretty basic concept and doesn't change much over time, but that doesn't exempt it from the list of policies and practices and procedures that the library would keep an eye on.
Because I know the seniors don't, as a senior, I know the seniors don't pay any fines, which I think is, I mean, how down and out could you possibly be that you could, what is it, 5 cents a day, or is it 10 cents a day?
The fines are pretty reasonable, I think.
I mean, if you need that help, I mean, I think, you know, if you were to ask for it, but I feel like there should be, I mean, like I have overdue things right now from the storybook show, because Katie was doing the intro, and I've got them in the car, and I'll remember to go for this. But sometimes I'm late with them, and I feel like, you know, and I did just join the Friends.
Congratulations. The Friends warmly welcome you, and I too am a member of the Friends.
Oh, good. Oh, so, but you know, I do have an issue. Maybe you can speak to this in some way. I get very annoyed when I go over there and I can't find what I want. And I've spoken to them about this, and I just see this enormous amount of women's books, and Maeve Binchy and Danielle Steele and some of these other, that, you know, you can go out and buy like that. I don't feel that I feel like a library should be buying a book I can't afford. For example, like I wanted the definitive biography of Mussolini, who was by a fellow named Bosworth. Well, lo and behold, it was in Taunton, and it seems like the books are in these towns where I'm pretty sure that the educational level is not quite as high as it is here, and yet a lot of the sort of quasi-academic and serious, you know, and not that I'm such a, but, you know, nonfiction books that I'm looking for, and they're over in New Bedford, they're in Taunton, they're in Fall River. And it just, you know, and they said, well, they get more money than we do from the government. And I said, but who's buying the books that determines the collection? And so I'm often annoyed about that, and I don't talk about it anymore because it's, you know, it's pointless. I mean, I've made, you know, but do you have any insight into that?
Well, a couple of things, Anne-Marie. One, I think it's very important to talk about exactly the topic that you raised. I mean, the library exists to serve everyone. So voices such as yours, or voices alike yours, are very important to be heard, and I appreciate the opportunity to
But I must be in the
respond.
minority.
Well, the important thing is that you are. It's a really good question, and there's kind of two factors at play here in the selection of books. The first is that the library does a repeating set of surveys that help inform what it is that people want. So primarily, the library will respond to what people say they want to borrow, and then, of course, they work in tandem with the schools to make sure that they hold the materials that the schools find necessary to support their curriculum.
Now, a survey like that would really only serve people that felt they were underserved because they would go by what people are borrowing, which I think would be like kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, if there's lots of Danielle Steele, and that's what you want, I mean, they must keep track of what people take out.
Actually, I'm happy to share with you that the library does not maintain records of what people borrow. The library does not maintain that.
I mean, I don't mean by individuals, but I mean overall.
More by perhaps genre or
Yes,
category.
that's what I meant, yes.
The library will know, basically, it's self-volunteering as opposed to data collection. People will volunteer what they want to borrow, and that will largely inform the collection. The other factor that informs the collections that various libraries hold is the size of the libraries and where they are located. I'll give you a good example. There's a library in New Bedford and a library in Fall River, and these are cities who have city library systems that are much larger than our library here in Norfolk. And so their collections can be larger just by their nature.
Oh, true.
Just by their nature. So some, by virtue of size, might have an item that we wouldn't have here in Norfolk. And the beauty of, one of the beauties of Norfolk's public library is that it's a member of the sales network and the virtual catalog, so that any item that you would want to have, if it could not be located within our own public library here, would be sought for in the sales network. And then, if not in the sales network, through what we call the virtual catalog, which encompasses everything in the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I've gotten some things in French from Newton that, you know, of course they have, I mean, just a ton of money, and they have a lot of highly educated people. So I was able to get some things in French. That library in Taunton is real. I think it's the one in Taunton that's all full of marble inside. And have you been down to that library? Oh my goodness, I think it's Taunton. It's very beautiful.
I have not, unfortunately.
Of course, Taunton was once a pretty wealthy town, because they had a lot of the factory workers lived there. And if you go through certain areas, and you see these magnificent, you know, Victorians there.
Taunton has a very rich history. A lot of metal finishing was done in Taunton, which was all up and down the eastern seaboard from Providence to Boston. It was very rich in the metalworking, jewelry, fabrication.
Now, when are those surveys done? We're going to be done again, so I can.
The last survey that I can remember right off the top of my head being done was around 2005.
Oh.
That was the time when I worked with the library on their strategic plan, which is required to be updated periodically by the state in order to qualify for grant money. And one of the things that I had shared earlier on is that the Board of Trustees now has as one of its side issues working with the library director to determine when and if a new survey has to be done and how it might best be done, so that everyone in the community, even those without computers and those who might not necessarily make a trip to the library, can participate.
Oh, all right. And so now, is there any other news that you can tell us about what's been going on over there, other than these, you know, the getting the budget ready and some of these other issues? Any other news from there?
There is, Anne-Marie. One of the things that was brought to my attention when I joined the trustees last May is that one of the elements of the strategic plan is to create what you might refer to as a commons environment, or a lifetime learning environment, where people of all ages and all backgrounds can come to learn and to grow. And my first involvement with that is when I was once invited to the library to give an annual presentation on identity theft and information security and information protection, which I'm happy to do each fall. This is just one example of how people can come to the library to learn. Another example is we have lectures from professors and presentations by authors.
There was one the other night, was there not?
There was one just last night by a gentleman who's a professor of history who talked about the Battle of Bunker Hill. It was very well attended. The room was a sellout room. There were no seats left by the time I was over. And just to make sure that everybody knows, the library does not charge for participation in any of these events. It was an overflow crowd. We had people standing last night.
Now, is there anybody coming soon that you might mention about, that you know of, that's up and coming, and another lecture that's coming soon?
Well, right off the hand, I can't, but I would recommend that everybody visit the library homepage to see there's a small block that denotes the calendar, and then you can also go and look in advance of the published calendar, the small rectangle on the webpage that will show you months out in advance who is coming. The library also sends on a monthly basis a list of library events that are going to happen in that particular month. And anyone can subscribe to that list.
Who gets that? Oh, you subscribe to it.
You could just put your email address in the library, and if you have a library card, of course, and you volunteered your email address, you'll automatically get that.
I didn't know.
Even if you don't have a library card, you could stop by the library and say, I would like to get your monthly newsletter.
So I guess some of my complaints have been hollow.
I wouldn't say that. I'd say...
I mean, about the, I did not realize that room that little building had been on the town hill. I didn't know that.
Well, you know, it's funny. There's a lot to know about the library, and that kind of brings me to the point where the library really is kind of the center for educational, cultural, and reference in the town. And it's a wealth of information, and I myself have learned a great deal since being on the Board of Trustees about the town, about the library. It's a fascinating place to live and to learn and to read, and I'm a big supporter, as you know.
Now, here's a question. Is there any kind of material, let's say somebody was interested in the Marquis de Sade's works. Would they not buy that because of its nature as pornography, or would they? I mean, they're not buying the Bible, Mussolini. I don't think. But just for argument's sake, would they say not buy that, or would they buy it and hold it aside, or would they say, well, there's all these other libraries, maybe even go to some university where that would be available? Would they not want to put money into something that people might consider to be, over the top, or
Well, I think that the concept in a public library is that it's information for all. And although we can all think, I'm sure, of various examples of material that would be inappropriate for inclusion in a public library collection, I think the larger question rests with the community and what the community wants. The community shares what it wants. Neither the Board of Library Trustees nor the Director of Libraries we subscribe to the policies of the American Library Association, which abhor any form of censorship, although there's always an element of reason that is applied to everything in life. But I cannot think of an instance where there would be an outward effort to ban a book. It seems to run counter, at least to me personally, it runs counter to our democratic ideals and the ideals that are enshrined in public libraries.
The reason I asked is that, for example, with the cable, it's supposed to be conformant with standards of the town. So, for example, you would see things on public access in Cambridge that I don't think you would see here.
I suppose that's possible.
The variety of.
I would encourage people with the point of view to bring forward, or with content that they want to bring forward. I think they should be free. This is my personal feeling now, not as a library trustee, but as an individual, that people should feel free to bring forward what they want to share, and let the community judge whether or not it's appropriate to be shared.
Well, it's true.
I think we're on the same page there.
I just wanted to say one thing. As I mentioned earlier, I just wanted to mention that I wanted to say thank you to the people here that supported me with the show. The show is a year old, and I just wanted to thank Donna Jones, who is always there to help and do whatever she has to do. Katie Woodhams is extremely gifted with the editing and the intros that you've all seen on my shows and other shows, and of course Dan has a tremendous amount of enthusiasm. So I just wanted to thank, and it's just meant a great deal to me, not just because of those people, but I've just enjoyed doing this so much. And I just wanted to thank people who've been watching, and to thank those people. And my guest today was Glenn Hill, who is the Incumbent Library Trustee. The election is May 6th, so be sure you go out and you do it. And we're going to have more of the candidates coming on the show. So thank you. It's been so interesting because I've learned all kinds of things I didn't know.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, very much.
And I really appreciate that. And good luck in the election.
Well, thank you very much.
And thank you for watching State and Local.